Christa Biegler, the host of the Less Stressed Life podcast, author of the Eczema Relief and Diet Cookbook, and the founder of the Eczema Nutritionist, specializing in difficult skin and digestive issues. She lives with her unicycling husband and kids in the Midwest. So you shared a bit like this. You learned a lot about eczema because you had to for yourself. Were you already in the health world when it developed, or were you a kid when it developed? Tell us that part of it.
Yes. So I remember it being around in high school for sure, because I remember getting prescription creams for it at that time and just kind of thinking this is just one of those things that you have to have, right? I didn't know any difference. And actually I had, my sisters kind of had similar things, but you know, with genetics, those of us that have or had or have a flare or had a flare to eczema, you're going to be generally predisposed to having skin issues. So while you may be able to reverse the flare and you may be able to understand how to quell it or reverse it, you could possibly have a flare in the future if the right circumstances arise again. So in high school, I was like, oh, it's just genetic. And so it would kind of come and go. Mine behaved like, oh, some dry skin in the winter, just naturally a little bit drier skin or more combination skin. There's lots of different skin types, which is interesting as well. So, and people are really motivated by how their skin looks, aren't they? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So skin types and different products are kind of interesting around skin, or there's a big market for that. So high school is when it started, but I was practicing conventional dietetics, and I was kind of early in my career of integrative nutrition, and I'd probably been at it for, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. And then I'm sure the right set of circumstances, including stress, hit when you're early kind of creating a new thing. And I had a heck of a flare. Actually, it was largely triggered by an environmental factor at that time. I had taken my kids to swimming lessons every single day at a brand new pool about 45 minutes from us. That was the closest swimming pool. And after about the 5th or 6th day, I broke out in a flare I'd never seen before. I've never had anything like it, and I haven't since, but it was insane. It was like angry, the kind where you wake up and your skin's so like dry and cracked, like you kind of want to cry because it hurts really bad. So it was really awful. And it was in a handy place. It was around my eye and on my neck and like places I couldn't really hide. So that sucked, right?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of in denial because I didn't really want to deal with that. And I was not working with eczema at all in my private practice at that time. So it was humbling. It was not fun. It got worse before it got better, because when I tried to find people to help me, I was coming up so empty to try to find people to help me. So I just dug into research. I was a guinea pig on myself. I don't recommend it. And eventually I had some breakthroughs. But again, like I said, it got worse. I remember reaching into the cupboard and grabbing handfuls of pecans, and I could feel my eyes swelling right afterwards, which I'd never experienced anything quite that quick, quite that severe. So it took several months before it really quelled. And it's so fun because everyone's like, what's wrong with your skin? What's wrong with your face?
Why are you giving me nutrition advice when your face looks like that?
Exactly. It was awful for a little while, because I knew it was still around. This happened late in the summer. I knew it was around at Christmas because I remember some family members kind of asking me that. So I got over it. That was great. I was ready to I didn't want to talk about that part of life. It was not enjoyable. I didn't think, oh, I know I can really use this to help people. That's not what I thought at all. But you know, karma happens, and there was someone who had a Facebook group, wanted someone to talk about nutrition and eczema and allergies. So I did. And then I had people that wanted to work with me around that. And I said, well, this is kind of an experiment, but we succeeded actually pretty quickly. And then it turns out there was a huge need, and the rest is history. So
yeah,
it's really great when someone gives you a chance. And I always say that my clients are my best teachers. So there are things that I intimately know from experiencing it, which is not something you can be taught exactly, but I also just from listening so darn closely to how that skin behaves, have learned so much from the clients. So
okay, cool. So let's dig into some causes. Like you think kind of implied with chlorine, it sounds like, from the pool.
Yeah.
Some food sensitivities issues, stress.
Which I think the food sensitivities came afterwards, right? So annoyingly, and then there was gut imbalances too that kind of followed me for a long time. So there was, I want to say, when I think about chlorine, etc., I think about liver stress. So I think about there are at least 4 ways we get rid of things: waste, detoxify, etc. Right? I know obviously you talk about this all the time. Detoxification is natural, normal, etc. Right? We do it several ways. We do it through our bowels. We do it through our urine. We do it through our skin and our lymphatic system. So right there, if our skin is reacting in a certain way, it's not able to keep up in some way. So the liver says, hey, a little tired over here. Can you help out? Skin says, yeah, sure. Throw me the ball. I got this. And so when I think about chlorine or environmental factors, I think about liver wanting support first. So then I think about gut things. And so the annoying part is if you don't technically have digestive issues that you recognize or that are problematic for you, you may not think you have any gut issues. That's an annoying part, right? To have gut issues, but for it to really mediate on your skin or in your period or in your mood or in some other way that doesn't feel like a gut issue, right? And so that actually I came that I came kind of later. And actually with gut issues, that's where food issues come from, right?
Right.
Very frequently. So so there's a lot of root causes there. There can be, as you have talked about so much, you could have mold. Like mold is interesting, right? Because, and I don't dig too much into that. I always look for, like, at the simpler things first. But if we're talking about mold, we could be just talking about fungal overgrowth anyway. Mold is a fungus, right? So there's bacteria, fungal issues, there are protozoa issues, and then there are nutrient issues. So if you've got gut things, or if you eat fast, or if you don't digest well, which is not always obvious, or you've had stress, you are going to have depletion. Or if you exercise really frequently, there are so many reasons that you would not digest and absorb nutrients awesomely, plus food supply issues, right? There's or genetic issues why you would not create the most active, greatest form of a nutrient. So nutrient deficiencies can definitely play a role. We may see this in fatigue, etc., playing out. But if we're thinking about nutrients in skin, I want to think about each cell has a phospholipid layer or a fatty acid like layer around it. And the health of that fatty acid layer or phospholipid layer in the cell allows certain nutrients like minerals and fat-soluble nutrients to come in and out of the cell. Lovely. So I have a crappy analogy for this. It's not that good. Have you ever tried to plant grass seed and grow a lawn?
I actually am doing that right now.
Okay, not that fun. I'll give you some, I can tell you what I'm gonna do, what I'm
Give me
doing
some
for a lawn
advice.
after this interview. Yeah, because it's actually like a comedy show trying to grow grass at our house. But where we live in a place that's kind of sandy, so the soil's not that good. So I think about that as a dried up phospholipid layer of the cell. The grass seed doesn't really permeate; it just kind of blows off instead of going in. Instead of this nice, great, awesome soil that's like receptive and ready for that grass seed to kind of sink in and cover up and grow and flourish. So if we think about a kind of a dry, cracked phospholipid layer, then if we think about cells making up tissues that make up our skin, and if it's a dry phospholipid layer, then that can be a root cause of dry skin eczema, right? Eczema is not, as we were talking earlier, we're using one word to describe many manifestations. So maybe it looks like redness, hives, and it's in these typical places, your elbows and behind your knees, etc. Or maybe it's just dry, flaky skin, or maybe it's a combination of both. So I think all of those things kind of play into like, it's not one thing. Unfortunately, it's not one thing. These things obviously play into each other, which is the annoying part, because with skin, we think we'd like it to be simple. We're like, oh, it's just skin. So I just want to be able to put something on it. And that's how we've been kind of taught, right? With skin, it's external. So we've been taught to kind of put something on it. But fortunately or unfortunately, it grows from the inside out. So we do need to look internally and externally. So even though we want it to be superficial, we want it to be kind of quick, it's one of the more difficult conditions that I work on, because it is external and internal, and the huge emotional part. And in fact, I always talk about, I like to have like systems and ways to think about things. And I always talk about the eczema triad, which is you have to approach this from at least 3 angles: the internal angle, the external angle, and the emotional angle. Because externally, we do have issues as well, which is something we're kind of well versed in society. Like there are kind of external products out there, or they sell well, so maybe there's like a huge market for external skin products, but those do exist. But just the skin barrier it's breaking down through the itching and the rash process can make the situation much, much worse. So itching on its own makes things worse because you have translocation of bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus. And if it gets really ugly, oozy, not good, and until that staph infection is corrected, you're not going to be successful going about it from internal. So you can't ignore the external when you're addressing the internal. And in a similar way, we probably need to hear more often, you can't just treat external. You probably should do some things internally too. Now, I love it when skin resolves quickly, right? Everyone's seen the Facebook post like, oh, I just gave my child this and it fixed their eczema. Like, awesome. I'm so glad that worked. That's like great that it was kind of simple for you. I hope that it sticks, right? Because if we have a predisposition, or if we haven't fully addressed all the root causes, then is there a chance it could pop back? Yeah, sure, absolutely, right? So
definitely,
anyway.
yeah. So is the staph always like externally present or not necessarily?
So that's like well known in the dermatology world that we have an overgrowth of Staphylococcus aureus on the topical microbiome, on the external microbiome. So that's pretty well known. Now, is it always there? I mean, I don't know, because I'm not culturing it. We just know in research, like we're like very clear, this factually, this is there. Now, factually in my practice, I see internal staph all the time associated with eczema. And that is in the literature as well to some extent, but for some reason, we don't really, that's not widely, when I talk to other skin experts, we aren't, that's not always talked about. Or it's definitely not talked about in dermatology world. I wouldn't say that's common knowledge to talk about it internally, but externally, we are aware that there's an overgrowth of Staphylococcus aureus associated with eczema. We definitely know that.
Interesting. Okay.
So addressing a staph aureus infection or a staph infection is a common thing. Sometimes now, actually, this is pretty interesting. So I'd love to share this too. I've had clients where we thought this definitely seems very fungal. It acts very fungal. It looks and acts and seems very fungal. Let's get it cultured. And what I've learned from dermatologists who do more external stuff, and they're smart, they do that kind of stuff in their office. They've told me, because I've experienced where the client's gone to culture it and it's resulted in negative culture for fungal overgrowth, and I've had derms tell me that that's not a very accurate way to look at that. It just doesn't usually present in that way, or it doesn't really, like, our testing methodology apparently is not that awesome for that. So that's kind of secondhand information, but just FYI. They do topically trial staph stuff, and there are some different protocols for kind of bringing down that topical stuff. I mean, it's really like they use a type of antibiotic cream, honestly. And I think also, if we just think about, okay, what are we doing at home? There are like all these natural remedies out there people do, and they're like, oh, when I do this, it makes this better. Okay, well, let's think about what that means, because if you're using something that's kind of I'm trying to think of the right word here, stripping, changing the microbiome of the skin, like maybe wiping staph and things clear up. Example, my eczema was partially triggered by many days in a pool. However, very commonly, a treatment method that is handed out is to give a child a bleach bath. And I'm not saying that's totally right or wrong here. I want to point an association out. A bleach bath and going to swim in a swimming pool is very similar. It's like almost the same thing.
I would imagine that can maybe kill some bacteria, exactly, which benefits some people. Okay.
Yes. So if the skin looks better after they swim, well, then you're dealing with some topical staph. I mean, it's kind of like, well, this is like clearly that. And so I will just also mention the whole bleach bath thing. So that's a pretty common recommendation to trial. And to just be kind of swimming in bleach forever. So usually they use 1 cup for a bathtub full of water. And I've had other derms say, hey, you could just dunk the child or dunk the person in that bleach bath versus like hanging out in there long term, because you don't really know at first if that's going to be good or bad. And by the way, that could sting like the dickens. If you have like open wounds, I always suggest I am speaking to children a little bit here because it's so darn common. Okay. Like, there's a very good chance that the people watching are watching on behalf of a child. It's very, very common for that to be the case. So sorry, I keep going that direction, but I'm saying if you're an adult and you're trying to do something for a child, always try something on yourself first, please, because you never know how that's going to hurt. And you don't know, you can't say how, and be very, very careful about those things. Like test a little spot always. So, because we want to be
Okay.
super gentle, because this layer is already compromised. And by the way, there's so much to say about the difference between the skin, or the skin barrier between an adult and a child. It's, I guess technically it would be considered thinner. You are, like, when you rub in, like, let's say a steroid cream, it's a smaller surface area, it's much more concentrated than with an adult. So you do need to use more caution than I think we tend to do, because we just sort of forget. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to my brother-in-law once. He's not very natural-minded. And he's talking about he and his son have some eczema. And he's like, "Oh, you just put steroid cream on, and it goes away, no problem." And to him, he's like, "Problem solved. No need to look any deeper." And that's kind of another example of, like, yeah, that works. How does that work? It works by suppressing the immune system and, like, kind of taking that inflammation. And if you have no inkling to go any further, then you can stop
That's
there.
the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. There's two camps of people. They're the people that think either, well, actually, I mean, there's more than that, but let's just separate them into two places. This is causing a problem for me, or this is not causing a problem for me. Unfortunately, we're inspired to change via either inspiration or desperation, and it's usually desperation. So, for example, even in my own case, I am not immune to that same problem. I maybe had this for years and didn't know any different until it got so bad. It was like, I have to do something about this in a different way, because I didn't, we were forced to. The tricky and annoying thing about with so many kids, and I guess I feel like we know it is 10 to 20% is a large number. But I feel it's very magnified for me, I feel, because I'm kind of in that zone or in that niche, right? So I feel like I see it quite a bit. And so it's great that a lot of parents realize, okay, this isn't great, because, and then the other thing is, eczema is part of the allergic march. So it may start as eczema, they may outgrow it, it may become asthma and allergies later on. So being aware that these things go together is important. And what does that mean as well? But back to the steroid cream thing, that is our main primary treatment right now. I mean, it really is. And unfortunately, you're not supposed to just be on steroids for a long term. So in your brother-in-law's case, he uses it and then he goes off of it, and then, that's good that he can do that. But some people, like, this isn't going away, but no one's ever being counseled about titrating off of the steroids. And that's a big problem. I mean, there's a whole group of people trying to bring voice, which is a horrific condition, where people, their skin, it sucks for them. Like, their skin, they go through a very, very rough time, where their skin, like, it becomes red and just horrifically inflamed trying to come off of steroids, because they were used, they were used for because they were used for a long time. So it's a very challenging area. So yeah.
Okay. You just got a little choppy there for a sec, but that's the first time, so hopefully it won't.
Yeah, hopefully
chop up again. I don't mind to necessarily knock. Like, I've been sharing, I've been dealing with asthma that came back probably kind of from mold and, like, other things in my life. And I'm trying to figure it out from that root cause. But in the meantime, I'm using some pharmaceuticals too. Sometimes you have to stop.
Don't feel guilty.
Or you have to breathe. You can do both. You can explore one thing while you're still doing the other, because it is a process to get through all these root causes. My audience is very keen on all this stuff, but it's tough if you're new to this field, or even just like you mentioned, the emotions of your skin looking and feeling a certain way. And it's just taking a long time to figure out what is my thing. So you do have to navigate that. Even if you're like gung-ho, you still have to kind of navigate the time it takes to figure it all out.
Yeah. I have two things. One, someone said to me the other day, like, I don't really want this to be a whack-a-mole situation anymore. Like, oh, it seems like I made some progress over here, but then it pops up over here. That is the annoying part, right? So we try to be as strategic as possible and accomplish as many things as possible at once, because trying to experiment with this little piece of something right now and then another thing I mean, there's multiple ways. There's always more than one way to do something. The other point that I would just echo with your comment about pharmaceuticals is that absolutely the reason that I'm integrative is because everything has its place, absolutely everything. And we'd never want someone to feel guilty about using steroids. We just want to be informed about them, because that's the unfortunate problem. It's just a lack of info. Like people, if they have a bad reaction or later on with thin skin, they're like, I didn't know. So that's the crappy part. We want to be able to know, because then we can make decisions appropriately. And I always recommend, like if someone's trying to cut down on their steroid use, then sleep is the priority. So if they need it to sleep, then that's like a great time to be using it. Because if you can't sleep, you're not really going to heal and recover. There's a reason we're supposed to sleep a third of the day. And then fortunately, at least in a study with children, which is where most eczema research comes from, because large pool to draw from, 60%, over 60% of kiddos with atopic dermatitis or eczema reported sleep disruptions, but over 80% reported sleep disruptions during a flare. So this is a huge, huge issue. That is one of the most common concerns in some eczema, is sleep disruptions when it gets pretty severe. And that sucks. That's not cool. That's really hard on parents and people and kiddos and adults. So that's my number one thing, is we have to figure out how to sleep. And there's a lot to that too, like what's going on to your neurotransmitters and your natural sleep hormone. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that, I think, and they can be pretty simple. So sorry about that. I don't know if you heard my notifications go off, but we want to pay attention to sleep, or do what helps with that first. So that's what I always recommend. Like pick the most important things.
Sure.
When you're trying to make those changes.
So I want to ask you, since you're working with this day in, day out, like I think we hear some generalizations about skin, like, oh, it's coming from your gut, or it's because of poor detox. Like I know those general things, but I wonder if you have some specific examples you've seen a lot, like that are more particular, like certain patterns in the gut, or certain chemicals people have been exposed to, or just any patterns that you found that may kind of put some light bulbs on for people listening.
Yeah, we could. So really common pattern is, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, with Staphylococcus and Streptococcus overgrowth in the gut. So, but regardless, also I see H. pylori quite a bit, but that's also statistical too. Like there's quite a bit of that out there, and it can be detected. So it's unfortunately, some of our testing for that isn't that great, and then some of it will detect it down to a very small amount in the way it's tested. So I see that a lot, but in general, when we've got imbalances in the gut, then we will start to have issues with histamines. And so we're generally kind of familiar with histamines because we're familiar with antihistamines, right? For like allergy medication. Histamines are a bucket. So histamines are a natural neurotransmitter. Our body with good bacteria should be able to break those down and eliminate those when they have awesome gut and liver function. And so I see that very commonly being backed up and not working. So I'll go about that from a food. You're getting it from the environment too, like right now, 'tis the season for histamine. So people are really flaring now. So I'll look at it from a food temporarily standpoint, but if I could tell you to not Google two things, it would be histamine stuff and candida, because unfortunately there's like a lot of like crazy stuff out there about it that makes it seem like you have to avoid things forever, and that's not really my mantra. I'm like, we want you to be able to enjoy the widest variety of things forever. That's my personal mantra. I don't want people to feel like they're
I'm the same.
forever.
Like I'm the same way. Although maybe sometimes temporary could be good if you're really flared up or what have you.
Right. Yeah.
I always call it you got to go out over after those infections too. It's like I've seen people be on a candida diet for like 25 years, and like this is like candida.
Horrible. This is horrible for their microbiome, by the way, because when you limit foods for too long, you are no longer feeding it properly. And by the way, if you have a giant imbalance in gut bacteria, you're not going to make your natural gut healing compounds like short chain fatty acids. So if you've got great broad amounts of different fibers, your body's going to metabolize those fibers and feed great gut bacteria. So limited diets long term don't really work. Other patterns that we sometimes see, so we'll see issues like around fungus, around bacterial overgrowth. I work with a bunch of kids, so I'll often see patterns in birth story. So I'm always looking at the birth story of the child, because when there's a short lifespan, so I'll look around the birth story, and then also that first year of life. Very frequently something goofy happened if it's a more severe case, and or mom or dad have history of allergy, eczema, something like that. Because if you have some genetic, so there's 2 points to that. We share microbiome in the household, for sure. We've proven that. There's a study where they monitored everyone's microbiome. Someone was on antibiotics in the household. They monitor everyone in the family, and everyone's microbiome was influenced for either the 4 to 6 weeks that they did the study. So we just know, this is like the stuff we don't totally understand yet, but we just know that we share microbiome in a household. And then also we have a little bit of genetic predisposition too. So I don't usually jump into like genetics are the last thing I look at. But there are genetic pieces. So like my genetics, I have crappy liver genetics. There's a lot of issues there, but there are genetics around histamine breakdown too, DAO and HNMT, and genetics help tell how well that gene is going to make an enzyme work. And if you have, and enzymes make everything happen in the body. And so if an enzyme's not working properly, then something's going to break down. Other common patterns I see are in nutrients. So vitamin A deficiency, which is going to inhibit fungal overgrowth, help with the immune system. It's a fat soluble nutrient. So remember that phospholipid layer that makes up, so that's around the cell, makes up, cells make up tissues, tissues make up skin, right? Or tissues are skin. So if you're having fat soluble nutrient issues, that makes so much sense with dry skin or eczema, because, right, like if it's dry, it makes sense. So we see the fat soluble nutrients are A, D, E, and K, and a lot of people don't understand K2 very well. Your audience might, but K2 is majorly implicated in like cardiovascular and bone health. I'm not saying I see that tons in eczema, but I just mentioned that there's a couple of Ks. So I also see B vitamins being an issue. If there's bacterial imbalances, it's going to create food cravings. People are going to see flares around when they're eating carbs, and they're also going to see B vitamin deficiencies. And so do you just take B vitamins? No, I address again the root cause, but I see B5 be low very frequently because stress will sometimes create, compromise B5 or pantothenic acid. So those are some common ones I see. Unfortunately, with the liver stuff, there's not great ways to, like, that's a lot of history and kind of how things behave and just like weird symptoms. So those are a little bit different and kind of harder to pinpoint or talk about. Like I just hear it in their history or in the things that they complain about quite a bit. So I don't know if that helps at all, but those are common things I see. Let me try to think of another cool example. But I mean, I would say, like, especially if we're thinking about kiddos, I definitely think there's a lot to be said about that early life, just that short medical history. And then unfortunately, it's no one's fault, by the way, no one's fault, but in the times that I've had the opportunity to look at both mom's health and child's health, and in as much as possible, I'm always trying to look at family health anyway with a child, because I think everyone's health is going to influence the ultimate success of players anyway. But very frequently, mom's got some stuff going on. I'm just saying it unfortunately, remember I said earlier, like, it's hard to tell someone they have a problem that you don't think you have. I've been there. So it sucks when you don't feel like you've got gut issues, right? And again, like, I just think we always talk about gut stuff and it's not very cut and dry. So I hate to even keep going back to that, because there's other ways to look at this too. But I tend to think, I always like to think about it like I'm just supporting all the organs. You know, if all the organs are well supported, then everything else works. I'm thinking about supporting the digestive system and the liver and then adrenals, right? So high stress always plays a role and will also compromise nutrients, and will also be compromised if we're on long-term steroids, unfortunately, because when that's cortisone, and when you're adding that, your body then it's like, oh, I'm getting some, I'm going to just shut down some production of this. And so it down regulates quite a bit. So that's kind of an interesting piece, and probably has something to do with that topical steroid withdrawal thing. There are like, I know like 1 or 2 people that really work in that area. Like, it's just, there's a need for more people here for sure. So
yeah, I'm finding this so fascinating. So with the kid, it sounds like, yeah, you do see a lot of kids, you finding they're not eating the right foods, or they don't digest fats well, or some of both?
Well, if I had to try to simplify this so much, I would say if we're talking about food and nutrition and eczema, I would separate it to 2 major roads. And those 2 roads would be, is this person having food reactions or issues digesting foods? Unfortunately, it doesn't always look like you're having trouble digesting foods. Let me ask you this. how slow, now with a child, this may be a little bit different. And like with all different ages, like that's, I would say what the child is eating is not a huge problem for my practice because I've got health savvy people anyway, right? And so like
Okay.
that's not really the problem at all. Actually, oftentimes they're breastfeeding or something like that. So they've gotten some kind of funky inoculation somewhere else, and it's causing issues or food reactions. So we've got two things: food reactions or issues digesting foods. There's 100% overlap here as well. But it looks like one of these two things usually. So if we're not digesting things properly, those undigested carbs and proteins are going to feed more bad bacteria, and the bad bacteria are going to inhibit ability to digest. It may not look like much, and this is really hard to read in a kiddo under 1 and 2 because their bowel movements are all over the place anyway, which is kind of normal, to be perfectly honest. When you're a baby, like it's normal to have bowel movements all over the place. So I always think it's nice to have multiple things going on, so we can say, I like when it's not just the eczema that's going to improve. I like to monitor other symptoms. So I like to monitor in kids mood and sleep, and in adults, oh, and itch as well. But in adults, very similar. Some people are affected mood-wise, but kids are much more susceptible to the mood impact of what's going on microbiome wise. So like in adults, I'm always asking them to measure itch and sleep quality, and anything else that seems to kind of be associated with the eczema, on a 1 to 10 scale, because before the eczema improves or resolves the flare, you're going to see an itch improve, or you're going to see decreased itching, et cetera, and other symptom improvement. So I always ask people to look for those other things first before, because otherwise we get frustrated easily, right? Especially when it's just a visual thing. It's very easy to get frustrated quickly and to give up quickly and to try new things all the time. Every person with eczema has a graveyard of creams. Has a graveyard of creams, and we try to, sorry, I'm seeing the comments coming through. And so we always are like grabbing something and trying something different. And it's hard to like stop, slow our roll and say, okay, I need to test this kind of individually. Because if we're changing things even topically all the time, we have a lot of variables. This goes with every condition. If we're constantly changing variables and we don't give it a few days, we kind of don't really know what's causing a problem, which is, it sucks, doesn't it? So
that's a good point. Yeah, I think when you're, going crazy with your skin, like mentally, it's easier to want to be like, well, I tried that and that didn't work, so let me try this other thing I saw online or bought at the store or whatever. So I'm sure it really helps to have you, to kind of talk people through that process.
Do you want me to answer the questions that are coming up?
If you like to, yeah, unless there's, I was gonna go look on Facebook too, and then I need to wrap up fairly soon, but I can
sure.
If you want to answer a couple of those I can go look on Facebook for questions.
Yeah, so I'll just look through this. This one's kind of more of a comment about someone who tried some meds and tried some other topical things. So yeah, and then someone said they had ulcerative colitis for 20 years, but it was under control with non-steroid meds for years. And then F. Enris said, how can mood not be affected if one is not sleeping well and is itching all the time? Absolutely. So sleep has to be like the first thing. So usually I'm kind of willing to do, so I like to think I love looking at sleep. And of course I'm going to go straight back to gut stuff. So let's think about how good sleep happens. So I'm obsessed with, I've got a couple things I want to talk about related to this. So I'm obsessed with how light affects your health, and it's called photobiomodulation. And so light hits our eyes and our skin cells and sends messages to our body to, hey, it's time to produce this hormone. It's time to do this job now. So seeing the sun in the morning for a few minutes, or about 5 minutes in the morning, will help your body. It'll help tell your body, your brain, et cetera, hey, it's time to start making that melatonin for nighttime. So something simple and free like that can make a big difference. There is actually, for people that live in cloudy areas, it doesn't matter if there are clouds. So you can actually like see through the clouds. And for people, when it's in the winter time, there's actually there's like light boxes that are pretty darn inexpensive, and there's like alarm clocks that'll kind of simulate the sun as full spectrum light. So that's kind of a cool option. But also, talking about mood, serotonin, most of it is made in the gut, right? So 70+% of it, and that's a precursor to melatonin. And so if we're not really making great, so B vitamins and magnesium, et cetera, help make serotonin, and good gut bacteria help make serotonin. So if that's not really going well, that's kind of like one of my favorite first things to look at with sleep. But I'm a big fan of using whatever agent you can to help you sleep, because it's so obviously it's just like, it's non-negotiable to not sleep well, right? If you're trying to
No,
heal.
I'm with you. Yeah. I'm like, do an herbal thing, do melatonin, do whatever. Like, there's a lot of different hacks for sleep.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Melatonin's fascinating, right? Because it's a sleep hormone, but also an antioxidant. So it's just a really, I'd like to do a whole podcast episode about just, it's kind of cool when it's like lives a double life.
Yeah, it's like very helpful actually for preventing like serious COVID, as this vitamin D that you mentioned earlier. Since I have screen share, I want to go share your site real quick, and you can just tell us what people can find on there.
Yeah. Anna said, she asked me if I was familiar with a book about called Diet Wise about food sensitivities. I'm not. I'm really, really, really familiar with food sensitivities and I have like strong opinions about how I think that they should be addressed, because I don't think they should be treated like allergies or considered long-term things. So I have a podcast episode about it, episode 26 on the Less Stress Life podcast, about listen to this before you do any food sensitivity testing. And then also I have a book there where I go through. So this is like a general way, right? Without testing, someone can go through and kind of more comprehensively look for those food type triggers. The goal of this book it's a cookbook largely, but then there's a whole front section about some of the root causes, triggers, etc. And the goal I was going for here was this long-term restriction is not serving people. And so I was hoping to, and also like trying this and then trying this and then trying this, like feels so difficult sometimes and so futile. And so I gave you a couple options in the book on ways to do things on your own. And so it's meant to be like a comprehensive, like let's figure this out all at once. And you're either going to see a difference from it or not, but now you're going to know and you can move on. You can put that root cause technically aside. So, and I use kind of one of the more common, some of the more common food triggers that I see. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, so this is really beautiful and easy to navigate. I would say if you're particularly wondering about eczema, let's see, you said should I click over to this one or?
Well, yeah, go up to the top and click on Eczema Nutritionist. Nope, right there on the navigation bar. Yeah. So this is something new we did kind of when the book came out, because I wanted to just put resources in one place. We're still building it out, but like last month we did really great series on my podcast about all kinds of skin related stuff, really great stuff. So we've got all those up as pretty good blog posts now, as well as the podcast episodes over here. So we'll continue to work through this, but I want to have options for people to go one place and find their eczema resources.
Yeah,
so we created this
beautiful.
site.
I love it. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's just so clear. This is something I need to work on my side. I'm like,
I am always working on this.
Right. It's never ending. So there's like a free webinar, it looks like, or you can schedule a chance to talk to you. And I would say, share this with a friend. Not everyone listening may have eczema, but like I was just sharing, my friend is going crazy with her skin right now, and I wish I could help her more, but I'm like, I know,
it sucks.
Don't really know.
The hard part is someone tagged me in a Facebook post the other day, and the woman, she said, what are your resources for eczema? And there was like 96 comments, which, and then she sent me a message and she's like, hey, what would this look like? And blah, blah, blah. I said, well, if I send you a message here, like we can't accomplish that much in an Instagram message here. So like my process is I love to serve people and just have a conversation with the history, so I can tell you from my experience exactly what I think is wrong. Whether you want to work on it together or not, I'm not offended by that, but I really want you to feel, my goal is always to help people feel really empowered by what is going on. I want you to be able to fix yourself. I don't want people to rely on me forever. I want to teach you how to fix yourself. And so I can't do that in an Instagram message. So, so I'm like, well, I mean, we should talk about if it's something of interest. But regardless, that's why the book is also there, right? Everyone's at a different place. And that's also why the podcast is there. It's because I want to inspire, enlighten, etc., and provide value to people. And so I mean, and I'm not happy in the podcast if I'm not learning something, and I really enjoyed the skin month. So if you have skin issues, I mean, feel free to start there as well.
I used to do
It's
that on
free.
my podcast too. I would do like a month, a theme. It's fun to have like a theme and go a little deeper. Now the site, now it's working. I wonder why I couldn't pull that up before.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, I really enjoyed this. I want to just keep learning about it. It looks like you do some practitioner training too, or is that just something you're thinking about, you're collecting names for the future?
Actually, that is happening in a couple of weeks. So in general, how I help people a few ways with eczema. So we've got the book. We'll have a course coming down the pipeline. For the longest time, it's just been one-on-one. But I was telling you, I think off air, that really there's not enough people that have awesome information about addressing skin issues. So therefore, I feel like the full calling there is to help train other practitioners to be much better at skin issues and understanding skin issues. And so I have a case study mastermind for health professionals that we're starting our first session in a couple of weeks, and then we'll do it again in the fall. And we were just talking about putting our wait list up for the fall. There's still an opportunity if someone was listening and there's like one more spot, we would consider allowing someone else in. It's not just about skin issues though. It's about all, it's me saying, it's based on case studies. So we have a theme for that month. And so like it's voted on by members. So, oh, you want to do nutrient interactions for blah, blah, blah. Oh, you want to learn how to interpret this for blah, blah, blah. Like it's me going through cases or case studies and showing here's the problems, here's what we did, here's the results, because I think that is a massive gap for practitioners and it's really needed. And so I'm really excited to offer that. So I'm just jazzed about that thing that we're doing. So,
awesome.
But people can always book a call if they want to learn. So.
Okay, yeah, right now that health professional button goes to like a one-on-one session. Maybe
it does.
It was kind of closed to, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, we definitely have some practitioners out there. So I just say, yeah, reach out to Christa if you want to just pick her brain or get on the waiting list for next time. Yeah, such great information. I feel like I just want to say we've had a bit of a theme on the show, and I think it's just something we need to keep talking about. It's just, functional medicine is very sexy, and it's also not very sexy sometimes. It's slow, and like I really appreciate, my audience who has this bigger picture of you, and I appreciate you being honest with it. Like it's gonna take like your patience and tracking little things, and I think that's really good just for us to keep remembering. Even things it just is a very clear symptom that's just the tip of the iceberg, right, of all the things going on beneath the surface, which are totally achievable, and you helped yourself and you've helped clients, but just a good reminder to just like take a breath and know like it's going to be a process. But you're going to get better. To the end. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Christa. And reach out to everybody. Reach out to her if you have questions. And let's keep in touch.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody.